Rancher buys a ghost town for $50 and finds Apache girl hanged at the gate. The rancher was a quiet man who liked simple things. He woke up before sunrise every day, fed his animals, checked his fences, and worked his land with patience. He did not care much for town gossip or big city news. His life was peaceful, but also lonely. He had lost his family years ago, and since then he had learned to live with silence. The wide open land was his only company, and the sound of the wind through the grass was something he understood better than people. One evening, while sitting in a small local diner, he overheard two men talking about something strange. They were laughing and shaking their heads, saying no one in their right mind would want that place. The rancher was not trying to listen, but the words caught his attention. "A whole town for $50, one man said. "A ghost town. Nothing but broken buildings and bad stories." The rancher looked up from his coffee. A whole town for $50 sounded unreal. He slowly turned in his seat and asked them what they meant. The men looked at him with surprise and then with small smiles, as if they were enjoying sharing a strange tale. They told him about an old town that had been abandoned many years ago. It used to be a busy place with shops, homes, and people walking the streets. But over time, people left. Some said it was because of money problems. Others said there were sad events that made people afraid to stay. No one seemed to agree on the full truth. All that was clear was that the town had been empty for a very long time. The land had been passed around from one owner to another, but no one ever did anything with it. Finally, the government or local office decided to sell it cheap, just to get it off their list. That was how the price became so low. $50 was less than the cost of a good dinner for two. Most people laughed at the idea. They said the place was useless. The buildings were falling apart. The roads were covered in dust. There was no running water and no power. And on top of that, there were stories. People said the town felt heavy, like it carried old sadness in the air. Some even said it felt like the past never left. The rancher did not laugh. Instead, he felt curious. He had always believed that land had value, even if it looked broken. He also believed that every place had a story, and stories deserved to be heard. He had some savings, and $50 was not much to him. What caught his heart was not the cheap price, but the idea of forgotten land. That night, he could not sleep well. He kept thinking about the ghost town. He imagined empty streets, old wooden doors and windows covered in dust. He wondered who had lived there and what their lives were like. He wondered what made them leave. He did not believe in silly rumors, but he did believe that places could hold memories. The next morning he drove to the local office to ask about the land. The clerk looked surprised when the rancher said he was interested. The clerk warned him that the town was in bad shape. There would be no easy money to be made there. No one was going to rush in to buy houses or start businesses. The rancher simply nodded. He was not looking to get rich. He was looking for something else, even if he could not fully explain what it was. After filling out some simple papers and handing over $50, it was done. Just like that, he owned a ghost town. When he held the papers in his hands, he felt a strange mix of excitement and responsibility. It was not like buying a normal piece of land. This place had once been full of life. Now it was empty, and he was the only one who seemed to care. A few days later, he packed some food, water, and tools into his old truck and drove toward the town. The road became more narrow and rough as he went. The land around him looked dry and wide. The sky felt bigger out there, and the silence felt deeper. There were no houses nearby, no stores, and no signs of modern life. It felt like driving back in time. As he got closer, he saw the outline of old buildings in the distance. They stood quietly, as if watching him. The town sign was faded, and some of the letters had fallen off. He slowed down and parked his truck near the entrance. When he stepped out, the air felt different. It was not colder or hotter. It just felt heavy in a way he could not explain. The wind moved through the empty street, carrying dust and small pieces of dry leaves. The sound of his boots on the ground felt too loud in the silence. He walked slowly, looking around. Old wooden houses leaned to one side. Windows were broken. Doors hung open or were missing. A small store still had a sign above it, but the paint was peeling. Inside, he could see empty shelves and a floor covered in dirt. It was clear that people had once lived here. There were signs of everyday life everywhere. An old chair on a porch, a rusted bicycle near a fence, a broken toy half buried in the dirt. These small things made the place feel sad, not scary. It felt like people had left in a hurry, leaving parts of their lives behind. The rancher felt a tight feeling in his chest. He imagined children running in the street, neighbors talking, and families sitting together in the evenings. Now there was only wind and dust. He walked toward the old gate at the edge of town. The gate was tall and made of wood, though much of it was cracked and worn by time. It looked like it had once been a proud entrance, a sign that people were welcome. Now it looked tired, like it had seen too much. As he stood there, he felt something deeper than curiosity. He felt respect. This was not just land to him anymore. It was a place where people had lived, loved, struggled, and hoped. Whatever had happened here, it had left a mark. He did not yet know the full story. He did not yet understand why people spoke of the town with quiet voices, but he could feel that this place carried more than just broken buildings. It carried memories that had never been put to rest. Instead of turning away, the rancher made a decision. He would not treat this town like a joke or a cheap deal. He would walk its streets, learn its history, and try to understand what really happened. He felt that buying this town was not just an accident. It felt like he had been led here for a reason. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the light turned golden, shining on the dusty buildings. For a brief moment, the town almost looked alive again. The rancher stood quietly, holding his hat in his hands, and promised himself that he would not let this place be forgotten. This was only the beginning. He did not know it yet, but the ghost town was about to change his life in ways he never expected. The $50 purchase was not just a deal. It was the first step into a story that had been waiting for someone to finally listen. The rancher did not leave the town that first evening. He set up a small camp near one of the stronger buildings and cooked a simple meal. As the sky grew dark, the stars came out in large numbers, brighter than he had seen in years. The town was silent, but it did not feel empty. It felt like it was watching him, waiting to see what kind of man he was. He slept lightly and woke up many times during the night. Not because of fear, but because the place felt different. The wind made soft sounds as it passed through broken windows and empty doorways. Each sound felt like a quiet reminder that this town still had a presence, even if no one lived there anymore. When morning came, he stood up, stretched his arms, and looked around. The sunlight showed more details he had missed the day before. He could see old footprints in the dirt that were not fresh, but not too old either. He wondered if someone still came here sometimes, maybe to remember, or maybe just to look. He decided to explore deeper into the town. He walked slowly, taking his time. He wanted to see everything, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. He felt that rushing would be disrespectful to the place. Near the edge of town, close to the old gate, he noticed something that made him stop. There was an old wooden structure near the entrance that looked like it had once been used for notices or announcements. The wood was dark and worn. Time and weather had changed its shape, but it was still standing. Attached to it was a very old piece of cloth and a small handmade charm. They looked like they had been placed there long ago. The rancher felt a sudden heaviness in his chest. He did not know why, but the sight made him feel deeply sad. He stepped closer and looked carefully. There was no sign of recent activity, but it was clear that this spot had meaning. It was not just another broken thing in a broken town. It felt like a place where something important had happened. The rancher took off his hat and held it to his chest for a moment. He did not yet know the full story, but he could feel that a young life had once been connected to this place. The air around the gate felt thick with memory. He did not see anything shocking in a physical way, but what he felt inside was heavy. It was the kind of sadness that comes when you realize that someone long ago had suffered and no one had truly listened to their story. He stood there for a long time, saying nothing. The wind moved gently, making the cloth move slightly. It almost looked like the town itself was trying to speak. The rancher whispered quietly, even though no one was around. "I don't know what happened here," he said softly, "but I will try to understand." As he walked away from the gate, his mind was full of questions. Who was the young Apache girl? Why was something of hers still here? Why had this place been left behind, with so much pain still attached to it? He went back to the main street and sat on an old wooden step. He drank some water and tried to think clearly. He knew that guessing would not help. He needed real answers. Later that day, he drove to a nearby small town. It was not very far, but it felt like a different world. There were people walking, stores open, and children laughing. Life was moving forward there, while the ghost town stayed frozen in time. He went into a small cafe and ordered a cup of coffee. An elderly man sat near him and noticed his dusty boots and tired face. The man asked where he had been. The rancher hesitated for a moment, then told him about the ghost town. The old man's face changed. His smile faded, and his eyes became serious. He slowly nodded, as if he had been expecting to hear that name again someday. "That place has a heavy past," the old man said quietly. "Not many people like to talk about it." The rancher leaned forward. "I want to understand," he said. "Not for money, just for truth." The old man took a slow sip of his coffee before speaking again. He said that many years ago, the area had been a place of conflict and unfair treatment. The Apache people had lived on and around that land long before the town was built. When new settlers came, there were broken promises and deep misunderstandings. Some people were treated badly. Some were forced to leave. Some stories were never written down, only passed from one person to another in quiet voices. The old man did not give many details, but his words were enough to make the rancher feel even more certain. The young girl was not just a sad story. She was a symbol of a larger pain that had never been healed. The rancher thanked the old man and visited a small local library. He looked through old newspapers, records, and faded documents. Many pages were missing. Some stories were short and unclear. But he found small mentions of trouble, disagreements, and people leaving suddenly. There was no full story of the girl. No clear explanation, just small pieces that did not fit together easily. That made the rancher feel angry and sad at the same time. It felt like someone had tried to erase the truth, or at least hide it under time and dust. When he drove back to the ghost town, the sun was already lowering again. The long shadows made the empty streets look even more lonely. He parked near the gate and walked back to the spot that had troubled him earlier. This time, he brought a small wildflower he had picked on the way. He placed it gently near the old structure. "This is for you," he said quietly, even though he did not know her name. At that moment, the town felt different to him. It was no longer just a place he owned. It was a place he felt responsible for. He began to see the buildings not just as broken wood and stone, but as witnesses. They had seen joy, fear, hope, and sadness. They had seen people come and go. They had seen a young life connected to this gate, and they had kept that memory alive in silence. That night, the wind was stronger. It moved through the town with a low, steady sound. The rancher sat by a small fire and listened. He did not feel afraid. He felt like he was being invited to stay, to learn, and to remember. He realized that buying this town was not just a strange deal. It was a responsibility to the past. The young Apache girl was no longer just a rumor to him. She was a real person in his heart. Someone who had lived, dreamed, and been caught in a time that was not kind. The rancher promised himself that he would not let her story stay hidden. Even if it took time, even if people did not want to talk, he would keep searching. Because now, the ghost town was no longer just a ghost town. It was a place of unfinished stories. After placing the wildflower near the gate, the rancher felt a strong need to learn more. He could no longer treat this like a simple land project. The town had a heart, and that heart carried old pain. He knew that if he truly wanted to respect the place, he had to understand its full history, not just small pieces. The next few days, he made it his routine to travel back and forth between the ghost town and nearby communities. He spoke with elders, farmers, shop owners, and anyone who might remember old stories. At first, many people were quiet. Some changed the subject. Some said they did not remember much. It was clear that the past was not something people liked to talk about. But the rancher was patient. He listened more than he spoke. He did not push or demand. He simply said that he wanted to learn so that the truth would not be lost. Slowly, people began to open up. One elderly woman invited him to sit on her porch. She moved slowly and spoke softly, but her memory was strong. She said her grandparents had lived near that area when the town was still alive. They had told her stories when she was a child. She said that long before the town was built, Apache families had lived on that land. It was part of their home, their history, and their way of life. When newcomers arrived, they promised peace and shared use of the land. But over time, those promises were not kept. The town grew, and the original people were pushed aside. Their voices became quieter. Their stories were ignored. The woman said that many painful things happened, but not everything was written down. Some truths were too uncomfortable for people to admit. The rancher listened with respect. He did not interrupt. He could feel that these memories still carried weight, even after many years. Another man who worked at a small repair shop told the rancher something different but connected. He said his great-uncle had once worked in the town. According to him, there had been growing tension between different groups of people. Fear, anger, and misunderstanding filled the air. People began to treat each other with suspicion. Small problems became big ones. Rumors spread quickly. Trust disappeared. The rancher began to see a pattern. The town did not die because of one single event. It slowly broke apart because of many wrong choices, unfair actions, and silence. The young Apache girl became a quiet symbol in these stories. Some people remembered hearing about a young girl who was often seen near the town. She was said to be kind and curious. She would watch people from a distance. Some said she helped with small tasks. Others said she came looking for someone who had promised to protect her family. Nawa seemed to know her full name. That made the rancher sad. A name is important. A name means someone is remembered. Without it, a person becomes just a story. The rancher went back to the library and searched again. This time, he looked deeper. He asked the librarian for help. Together, they found old maps, land agreements, and letters. Some papers showed how land had changed hands. Some showed broken agreements and unclear records. It became clear that the town was built on land that was taken in unfair ways. The words in the documents were polite, but the truth behind them felt heavy. The rancher felt anger rise inside him, but he kept it under control. Anger would not fix the past. Understanding might. One afternoon, he met a native elder from a nearby community. The elder spoke slowly and carefully. He did not share everything, but what he did share was powerful. He said that many young people from their community had suffered because of the changes brought by the town. Families were separated, traditions were interrupted. Some young people felt lost between two worlds. The elder said that the young girl was remembered in stories as someone who carried both hope and sadness. She was caught in a time when her people were losing their place, and the new town did not truly accept her either. She belonged nowhere, the elder said softly. That is a very lonely place for a young heart. Those words stayed with the rancher. He returned to the ghost town with a deeper understanding. When he walked the streets now, he no longer saw only empty buildings. He saw layers of time. He imagined Apache families living freely before the town existed. He imagined the town growing, changing the land, changing lives. He imagined the young girl standing near the gate, watching, waiting, hoping for kindness in a world that had become confusing and unfair. The rancher began to clean small areas of the town, not to erase the past, but to show care. He swept dirt from doorways. He picked up fallen wood and placed it neatly to the side. He fixed a broken fence just enough to keep it from falling completely. As he worked, he felt like he was speaking to the town without words. He was saying, "I see you. I respect you." At night, he sometimes felt a deep quiet around him. Not an empty quiet, but a full quiet, as if the town was listening back. He wrote notes in a small notebook. Names, dates, small details. He wanted to put the story together as best as he could. Even if it was not perfect, it would be better than silence. The rancher also began to realize something important about himself. His own loneliness connected him to the town's loneliness. He understood what it felt like to lose family, to live with quiet, to feel forgotten. In a strange way, this broken town and its hidden story were helping him heal parts of himself, too. He stood once more at the gate, looking at the spot where he had placed the flower days earlier. It was now dry and faded, but still there. "I am learning," he said quietly. "I am listening." The wind moved gently, and for a moment he felt a sense of peace mixed with sadness. The past could not be changed, but it could be honored. The hidden history was no longer completely hidden. It was slowly coming into the light, one story at a time, one memory at a time. The rancher knew now that his journey was not just about land. It was about truth. It was about respect. And it was about giving a voice to someone who had been silent for far too long. The ghost town was teaching him that some places are not empty. They are full of stories that are still waiting to be told. The rancher stood in the center of the ghost town as the morning sun slowly rose over the empty buildings. The light touched the broken roofs, the dusty streets, and the quiet doorways. For the first time since he bought the town, the place did not feel heavy. It still carried its past, but now it also carried something new: hope. Over the weeks, the rancher had worked with care and patience. He did not try to change the town into something it was not. He did not try to erase the past or pretend it never happened. Instead, he chose to honor it. He placed small signs near important spots, not to attract tourists, but to share simple truth. The signs told short, respectful messages about the people who once lived there, including the Apache families who had been part of the land long before the town was built. He worked with nearby community members to make sure the words were fair and honest. He listened when they corrected him. He changed things when they said something did not feel right. He wanted the story to be shared with respect, not pride or blame. One of the most important changes he made was near the gate. He cleaned the area gently. He repaired the wood just enough to keep it standing, without making it look new. He placed a small wooden marker nearby, simple and quiet. It did not give many details. It simply honored a young life and reminded visitors that every person matters. People from nearby towns began to visit, not in large crowds, but quietly. Some came out of curiosity. Some came because they had heard old stories and wanted to see the place for themselves. Others came because they had family connections to the area. The rancher welcomed them, but he also guided them. He asked them to walk with respect. He asked them to listen, not just look. Many people were surprised. They expected a spooky place. Instead, they found a place of memory. Some visitors became emotional. They said they had never been taught this side of the story in school. They said they had only heard one version of history. Now they were seeing that the truth was deeper and more complicated. The rancher did not try to be a hero. He did not stand in front of people to make speeches. He simply shared what he had learned and encouraged others to share what they knew. Slowly, the town changed, not in buildings, but in feeling. The air felt lighter. The silence felt softer. It no longer felt like a place that was holding its breath. It felt like a place that had finally been allowed to exhale. At night, the rancher still heard the wind, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like a gentle reminder that time moves forward, but memory can stay. He often sat near the gate in the evenings. He would bring a small lantern and sit quietly. Sometimes he would think about the young Apache girl. He still did not know her full story. He still did not know her name for sure. But in his heart, she was no longer just a mystery. She was a symbol of many young lives that were lost in history books and forgotten in official records. "She is remembered here," he would say quietly. "You are not forgotten." The rancher also found peace within himself. His own past pain felt lighter. By helping this town heal, he was also helping his own heart heal. He realized that honoring others is one of the strongest ways to find meaning in life. One day, a group of local students visited with their teacher. The rancher walked them through the town. He did not tell scary stories. He told human stories. He talked about families, hopes, mistakes, and learning from the past. The students asked questions. Some were difficult. Some were emotional. The rancher answered honestly. He told them that history is not just about dates and battles. It is about people. The teacher later thanked him and said, "You turned this place into a classroom of the heart. Those words stayed with him. The rancher also worked with Native community members to hold a small, private moment of remembrance. It was not a big event. There were no cameras. There were no crowds. It was just a quiet gathering to honor the past. They stood together near the gate. They shared words, silence, and respect. It was not about fixing everything. It was about acknowledging what had been ignored for too long. After that day, the rancher felt something change deeply. The town no longer felt like it was carrying a heavy secret. It felt like it had finally been allowed to tell its story. Months passed. The rancher still lived his simple life. He still fed his animals. He still fixed fences. But now, he also spent time at the ghost town regularly. It became a place of reflection for him. People began to speak differently about the town. They no longer called it just a cursed place. They called it a place of memory and learning. The $50 purchase became known as something much bigger than a cheap deal. It became a symbol of what can happen when someone chooses to listen instead of ignore. The rancher never became famous. He did not want to. He was happy knowing that he had done something meaningful, even if only a few people knew. Sometimes at sunset, he would stand on the dusty road and look at the golden light touching the old buildings. In that light, the town almost looked alive again, not in people, but in spirit. He would think about how easy it would have been to walk away on the first day, how easy it would have been to laugh and call it a waste of money. But he stayed. He listened. He learned. And because of that, a forgotten story found a voice. The young Apache girl whose life had been pushed into silence by time was now remembered with respect. The town, once filled with pain and quiet, became a place of gentle truth. And the rancher, a simple man who only wanted land, found something much greater. He found purpose. He found connection. He found that sometimes the smallest choices can open the door to the biggest changes. The ghost town was no longer just a ghost town. It was a place where the past and present met with honesty. A place where silence turned into understanding. A place where a $50 purchase became a lifelong promise to remember.